In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, I am going to revisit some old takes from myself and even from NBA scouts about this 2023 NBA draft class. We are a little more than a week away from the 2023 NBA draft, and I want to revisit some old takes from back in August, September, and even October to see what prospects we were wrong about and what prospects we were right about. So stay tuned. This is probably one of my favorite episodes because I love going back and revisiting the thought process and takes from months back. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that's made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board. And like I mentioned, as of today, right now while I'm recording this, we are about 8 days away from the 2023 NBA draft. I'm looking forward to it simply because I've been talking about these prospects since August. And one of my first articles that I wrote about this 2023 class was on August 1st, 2022. It's on NBABigBoard.com. If you're not subscribed, please check it out. And in my article for NBA Big Board, I had my top 10 best freshmen. And on this particular article, I broke down the top 5 that I thought would impact the 2023 lottery. And at number 1, I had Keyonte George. I had Keyonte George as my number 1 prospect or freshman prospect coming into the season. I just read a little bit of what I wrote. Listed as a shooting guard, George is a big-time scorer with effortless shooting stroke who can fill it up and collect buckets on 3 levels. His scoring repertoire was on full display last month in his unofficial college debut where he erupted for 32 points on 10 of 18 shooting while knocking down 6 of 12 from 3. Overall, George averaged 22.8 points at the Global Jam in Toronto, an international under-23 tournament that featured teams from 4 countries. George posted multiple 30-point games while leading Baylor, which represented the United States, to the championship game and a silver medal finish. So, here's my take. If he can continue to make strides as a distributor and find a balance between scoring and making plays, I believe he has a chance to be a top 5 pick in June. While I think it's very unlikely right now that Keyonte George will go in the top 5, I think that he will be a lottery pick based off of some intel that I heard. They believe, and multiple people believe, that he doesn't go past Toronto at number 13. George had a great global jam, like I mentioned, and then he had a good first half of his freshman season, and then he struggled in the second half of the season due to ankle injuries. And then there was a time, maybe before the combine, that a lot of people thought that he was not going to be a lottery pick. Now I think he's safe in that lottery range. He just got invited to the green room. So Keyonte, while he's not the number 1 player, not the number 1 freshman, I do think that he will be a lottery pick next week. All right, at number 2, I had Nick Smith as the number 2 freshman coming into the season. And I'll just read something that I wrote. Several scouts believe Smith is the top NBA prospect in college basketball due to his size, length, and scoring instincts. Listed at 6'5" with a reported 6'9" wingspan, the Little Rock native is comfortable playing either guard spot and is a smooth and crafty scorer who plays at his own pace. He's best when creating off the dribble and getting to his sweet spots where he has an effective pull-up jumper or can finish with an array of floaters and runners around the basket. In my opinion, Smith is a good, fluid athlete who lacks the ideal burst and explosiveness teams covet in a lead guard. A related concern is that he prefers to shoot floaters as opposed to finishing above the rim. Well, Nick Smith is definitely not going to be the number 2 freshman prospect drafted next week. Now, he did have some injury issues that kept him in and out of the lineup. He struggled keeping his rhythm. Now, I think Nick Smith has a chance to fall outside of the lottery. I think with Francis Bilal Coulibaly on the rise, I think Smith is one of the guys that is impacted the most. And I mean, there's only 14 guys, and there's some other freshmen that have exceeded expectations. But I think Smith is going to fall outside of the lottery and maybe end up in a situation where he's falls to Atlanta at 15, maybe Utah at 16 if Utah doesn't make a trade. And I reported yesterday on the NBA Big Board newsletter that Utah reportedly has an interest in moving 16 and 28 to try to get up a few spots, move up a few spots in the lottery to snag a guard, because I think they're going to select Coulibaly at number 9. So Smith could end up falling. I think his floor is maybe 17. I think there's a couple guys. I think their floor is 17 at the Lakers, and I think Nick Smith is one of the guys that could end up falling outside of the lottery. I don't think he gets past Utah at 16 if they keep it, but I definitely think has a floor at 17. All right, Cam Whitmore. Whitmore, I had him as my number 3 freshman prospect entering the season. And here's something that I wrote. He's blessed with the NBA-ready 6'7", 225-pound frame, which he's more than 225 now. Whitmore epitomizes positionless basketball as he can play both forward spots and create mismatches across the floor. He's a powerful, explosive athlete who plays with great energy and a chip on his shoulder. Although he's an improving shooter from long range, Whitmore does most of his damage in the paint, where he scores by attacking the offensive glass or as a transition finisher and punishing downhill slasher. So, I mentioned that he's young for his class, that he just turned 18 last July, and his combination of size, athleticism, motor, and shooting should make him a lock for the top half of the lottery. So, I did get that right. I do think that Cam Whitmore is going to be the second freshman selected in next week's draft. And even though he missed some time with a thumb injury, and statistically he did not have like a great freshman season, he still is the first Villanova freshman to be one and done since Tim Thomas back in 1997. So Cam Whitmore I wasn't correct. I wasn't as far off of his range. All right, here's one, number 4. I had Derek Lively, and I had Derek Lively as someone that I thought was a lottery pick. And here's what I wrote. Lively was considered the top high school prospect in the class of 2022 and headlines the first Duke recruiting class in the post-Coach K era. Last summer, Lively and 2022 lottery pick Jalen Duren formed a supersized front court and led their squad team final to a 35-3 record en route to the Nike EYBL Peach Jam. Lively averaged 3.7 blocks per game. With his size, length, frame, and defensive presence, Lively reminds me of a young Tyson Chandler. On offense, Lively is a vertical lob threat who provides gravity as a roll man and has decent touch around the rim, and he's shown promise as a passer and floor spacer. While that's similar to Chandler when he was the number 1 player in the high school class of 2001, Chandler never fulfilled his offensive potential in the NBA. But on the other end, he made his mark as an anchor who was named to 3 all-defensive teams and was voted NBA Defensive Player of the Year in 2012. All right, so here's something that I think that's pretty accurate, other than the fact that he didn't show promise as a floor spacer during the season. He has in the pre-draft process. But here's something that I wrote about Lively. On offense, I'd like to see Lively play more physically and aggressively to establish position in the post. That is something that did not happen. I put that he's easily pushed out to the perimeter and prefers to face up and play with finesse instead of using his size to his advantage. He often bails the defense out by settling for jumpers and avoiding contact. But that didn't necessarily happen this year. I think he took 13 jumpers total. Now, he did bail out the defense by not rolling to the rim. I thought there was plenty of times where he would set a screen and just not roll to the rim. So looking back at it, I don't think I was off about Lively too much. I think defensively he was really good. On offense, I didn't expect him to only average like 3 points per game. I thought he would be at least 10 points per game. Now I had him as the number 4 freshman prospect. I don't think he'll be the 4th one in next week's draft, but I do have him as a lottery pick just because of what he did on the defensive end. At number 5, and this is one that I was totally wrong about, and it's crazy that there was even a debate about this for most of the year. Kel'el Ware. I thought Kel'el Ware was going to be one of the top freshmen, and since he's not in this class, I won't spend too much time on Ware. But I thought that Ware and Lively was a real debate. Well, I think Lively's going to go top 10, and Ware may have just needed a change of scenery, but he did have a pretty disappointing season, to say the least. But this is what I wrote. I'm looking forward to tracking Ware's development this season. He has trended in the right direction. He rose steadily up the recruiting rankings and could be the first college star selected in next year's draft. Yeah, I was way off about that. He's a little unpolished as he lacks counter moves in the post and the left hand, and while it's not a must-have in his arsenal, he would benefit for him to extend his shooting range. Now, Ware has transferred to Indiana, but I would say that he had one of the more disappointing freshman seasons of the top freshmen in this class. All right, when we return, I'll continue to revisit some old takes from back in August, but I want to talk to you about PrizePicks. Now, if you're not familiar with PrizePicks, it is daily fantasy made easy, and the NBA playoffs are over. So you missed out on your opportunity to become a millionaire, but you can still win money on PrizePicks. And all you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and if they would go score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win 25 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It is just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you may watch, which includes NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer. I can go on. Esports and more. And the entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and it is currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. All you have to do is download the PrizePicks app, go to prizepicks.com and sign up and play daily fantasy sports. Again, it's daily fantasy made easy. If you are a first-time user, you can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code locked on. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So do not forget to enter the promo code locked on at sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. Once again, this is Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board, and I am revisiting old draft takes prior to the season. If you're on YouTube, you're probably looking and wondering why it looks like I'm in a dark room. I am not at home in Dallas. I am on the road. And in tomorrow's episode, you will have Richard Stayman and Leif Thulin. It may be a solo, it may be a tag team effort. They're going to share their opinions about next week's draft. All right. Let's talk about some other takes, good or bad, that I may have had prior to the 22-23 college basketball season. And like I said in the opening, I actually enjoy revisiting some of these takes just to see how off I was about prospects and how some prospects exceeded expectations and some just really failed to live up to expectations. And just, it has me thinking because we are, at least for me, I'm actually kind of ready for this draft cycle to end because I'm really looking forward to studying film on a new batch of prospects. And so I'm ready. All right, so let's talk about the second set of prospects that I had. At number 6, I had Whitehead. And I say that Whitehead is a tough, athletic, shot-making wing who can serve as a secondary ball handler and facilitator. He also projects as a versatile defender and one of the top two-way players in this class. When he's on, Whitehead is a matchup nightmare, but he's a streaky shooter who relies heavily on contested pull-ups. He has the speed and first step to be a dominant downhill attacker, but often settles for difficult jumpers instead of attacking the rim. Well, Whitehead is someone that I guess you can give him somewhat of an incomplete. He had a foot injury he suffered in the preseason, and he just wasn't the same player. I mean, it's just clearly obvious he wasn't the same player if you watch his high school film or what he showed at Duke. However, I thought that he was a streaky shooter. His shooting was something that he was consistent at, especially from 3. Shot over 40% from 3. I do like the fact that he starred in his reduced role. You can't tell me that's the role that he planned to play at Duke as a spot-up shooter. I thought he did a good job in that role. Unfortunately, he is going to, in my opinion, be a late first-round pick. He may go in the mid-first round. Somebody may, basically factor in or value his pre-college film over his current college film where he was basically kind of a shell of himself. But it's very unlikely that he ends up being the 6th freshman taken in this draft. And I didn't see a lot of the contested pull-up jumpers. Definitely did not see like the speed and the first step to like attack downhill. But again, that was all injury related. All right, at number 7, I had Gigi Jackson. I thought, this is what I wrote about Gigi. The 2023 NBA draft class was already considered a talented group and even got stronger with the recent addition of Jackson when he announced he would be reclassifying and playing for the Gamecocks. Still 17 until December 17th, Jackson will be one of the youngest players in college basketball this season. Jackson, one of the early favorites to be the top pick in 2024 before his decision to reclassify, is an uber athletic and skilled ball handling 4, adept at scoring off the bounce. He's also a promising shooter who can knock down pull-up jumpers, and his range extends comfortably to the three-point line. Jackson's size, length, and athleticism translates on the defensive end, where he has the lateral quickness to switch out and guard wings in space. His timing and vertical pop make him an intimidating shot blocker. All right, now this is something that was important right here that I wrote. For younger prospects, reclassification has led to mixed results lately, as Shaedon Sharpe was drafted number 7 in 2022 despite playing 0 college minutes. And I think there's some guys in this draft probably would have benefited if they played 0 minutes. Jalen Duren played well enough at Memphis to go number 13, and a former top prospect, Imani Bates, dealt with an injury and ineffectiveness before transferring from Memphis to Eastern Michigan. So the thing about Gigi, I'm still torn on if he made the right decision. And I'm a big Gigi guy. I'm a huge Gigi Jackson fan as far as his talent, and I just like Gigi a lot. So I don't think that he is going to go, well, I'm almost certain he's not going to go number 1, number 2. It's very doubtful he goes in the lottery. So reclassifying up 1 year, I think he cost himself a lot of money. I think that if he stays in this class, he's the number 1 pick in 2024. And 2023 is a strong class. And so it's just another example of the mixed results as far as reclassifying up. And we had, like I said, Shaedon Sharpe and Jalen Duren ended up being lottery picks. Imani Bates, I can make a case and say that really hurt him. And I think in Gigi's case, moving up definitely cost him some money because, like I said, I think he'll be the top pick. All right, number 8, another one that I was wrong about. Dylan Mitchell. I had him at number 8, and Mitchell, this is what I wrote. Mitchell, like Drake Whitehead, is a Montverde Academy product who could find himself in the green room as a lottery pick next summer. A top-tier athlete, the 18-year-old small forward impacts games with his energy and effort plays. A large chunk of Mitchell's points come at the rim, where he scores off dump-offs, putbacks, and aggressive drives to the rim in transition. The biggest area for improvement is his shooting, as a reluctant shooter who rarely scores outside of the paint. One bearish sign is that he shot below 50% from the free throw line in both Nike EYBL and as a high school senior. Despite his limited offensive game, Mitchell's two-way potential and ability to be effective without dominating the ball makes him one of the more intriguing long-term prospects. I think a lot of that serves true. Dylan Mitchell is very raw offensively. Very raw offensively. I think he's a 5. I think he's DeAndre Jordan in a 6'7", 6'8" frame. I don't see a lot of skill. I don't even see a situation where next year, unless he makes some huge improvements, that he's a lottery pick in next year's draft. Next year's draft is pretty weak. It's just you're just banking off his athleticism, but he's behind the skill. And he's going back to Texas. All right, let's talk about a prospect that I was totally wrong about, who could end up being another one of the top. I would say he's definitely going to be one of the top 5, and I had him at number 9, is Anthony Black. And I put Anthony Black is a backcourt standout listed at 6'7". Black is a versatile pass-first playmaker who fits the mold of the modern-day positionless player. Whether he's a primary ball handler or playing as a connector, Black's versatility, high IQ, and unselfishness contribute to winning basketball. And the biggest knock on Black are his inconsistent shooting. Though he's a capable shooter who can make open shots, that's questionable. And his lack of blow-by speed to break down defenses. Also, he's regarded as a good but not great athlete who can be unselfish to a fault. I'd say I'm probably 50% right on that. I don't know if he's a capable shooter. I think he shot 30% from 3 this year. He definitely needs to improve as a shooter. the lack of blow-by speed is crazy because he just doesn't look like he's super fast, doesn't look like he's a great athlete, but he was able to get to the lane when he wanted to this season, and we can see that by his foul attempts, and he is like a very good athlete. He's like an in-game athlete. He's a guy that gets in-game dunks, and he can be unselfish to a fault, but I thought that this year he showed that he can be. I thought this year he showed some flashes of being aggressive, and I think Anthony Black is going to be a top 10 pick. I had him at number 9, but there's not 8 freshmen that are going to be drafted ahead of him. And then at number 10, I had Cason Wallace at number 10, so you could see I was totally wrong. I've left off Brandon Miller and Jarris Walker, and then there was one guy like Taylor Hendricks that, who saw that coming. So with Cason, I mentioned that his greatest strength is his versatility. He's capable of playing and defending both guard spots while racking up rebounds, assists, and steals. He's been compared to Jrue Holiday, given his ability to lock down the opposing team's top offensive threat. Although Wallace does a lot of things well, there are questions about what his best position will be and whether he's a natural floor general. If not, that raises concerns about whether his shooting is consistent enough for Wallace to play off of the ball. Now, Wallace is, I believe, going to be a top 10 pick. And so I had him at number 10. I don't know where he's going to end up. He could also be someone that could potentially fall outside of the lottery. Simply because you figure based off of Coulibaly, like I mentioned, Taylor Hendricks, and even like Jarris Walker, guys that were freshmen, well, not Coulibaly's obviously not a freshman, but long story short, I think Cason Wallace is someone that I think his draft range could be 8 to 16, and I think there's a chance that he could end up falling outside of the lottery, like I mentioned, but I hope teams don't overthink it. Cason Wallace should definitely be a lottery pick. All right, when we return, I'm going to read some quotes from different scouts. And these are quotes on some of the prospects that I talked to them about coming into the draft. So let's find out how right or wrong they were about some of the top freshmen in the 2023 NBA draft class. All right, last segment. Let's talk about what the scouts told me about this freshman class at the beginning of the season. This is an article that came out in November, right before the team started. This is what a scout said to me about Derek Lively. The lack of aggression is a bit of a concern. He really does not do much in the interior, and in terms of rim protection, it's mostly second sider and recovery. He really doesn't put a lid on the rim like people think. He's not strong. And although Khalil Ware isn't strong either, Ware is willing to play inside while Lively isn't trying to mix it up. Another scout said, I think he can really shoot the ball and will shoot it well this season. And that's going to keep him in the lottery discussion. At his size, he can really shoot it off the catch. How many guys can do that and block shots? He's the second best big behind Wembanyama. All right, looking back at that, the lack of aggression, the first scout said the lack of aggression is a bit of concern. And you can say that's a true statement. He only averaged 3 points per game, was not aggressive at all on the offensive end. Now, he did say that he does not do much in the interior, and in terms of rim protection, it's mostly second sider and recovery. Debatable. But he says he doesn't put a lid on the rim like people think. Well, I would say ask North Carolina about that. I think North Carolina would tell you Lively puts a lid on the rim. He's not strong, and he is not willing to mix it up. This is what the first scout said. I think that is totally fair. The second scout talked about he can really shoot the ball and will shoot it well this season. Now, he was totally wrong about that. He did not shoot it well, but he is in the lottery discussion, and he showed at his pro day that he is a capable shooter, and so there is upside with his touch. So I would say this particular scout was 50-50. All right. The one that was like the most polarizing to start the season was Brandon Miller. He had the most conflicting commentary and had the widest draft range coming into the season. All right, here's an article that I wrote back on November 3rd. And the question was, what will Brandon Miller's draft range be? And this is what I wrote. Another SEC prospect who appears to be on the rise among scouts and agents I've spoken with is Alabama's Brandon Miller, perhaps the most divisive projected one-and-done prospect in basketball. Scouts seem to either love the 6'8 forward or be turned off by his tendency to settle for difficult contested jumpers when he has the tools to pressure the rim on a consistent basis. Here's what an agent said about Brandon Miller. He's a top 5 pick. That size and that shot making plus his athleticism is special. I see some Paul George in him. Now here's what another scout said about Brandon Miller being a top 5 pick. Now this kind of blow your mind. Even though this was back in January. Also, people weren't high on Brandon Miller as a top 5 pick. Really, I understand the intrigue, but the thing for me is that the most concerning is the lack of shooting progression, and that goes hand in hand with his age. Brandon Miller was turning 20 at the time. So this scout did not think that Brandon Miller had showed progress as a shooter and thought that at his age at 20, the lack of shooting progression did not make him, in his eyes, a top 5 pick. Another quote. He does some good stuff in the mid-range, and he's going to be a monster defensively, but returning sophomores are younger than him. Given his age and lack of shooting progression is concerning because he's not a great shooter at this point, and the decision-making is a little low. He's not like a late bloomer or anything. He's been on the map since he was young. Totally wrong. Brandon Miller had a really good shooting year. He's not a great shooter. This is what the scout said, but he shot 38% from 3 on a high volume of attempts. Another scout said, he's rising in my opinion, but it's early. The more I see his film, the more I like him. He's long, agile, he can score over the floor. I missed the TCU game, so there was like a scrimmage where Alabama scrimmaged TCU and Miller scored 33 points. And the scout says, I missed the TCU game, but I heard they didn't have an answer for him. He should be in the discussion to be one of the top 5 to 7 picks. Well, he's going to go higher than that. He's going to go number 3 at the minimum. All right, Jarace Walker. I haven't mentioned much about Jarace Walker. And this is what a scout said about Walker coming into the season. And I think Walker will be the 3rd freshman taken in this year's draft. I think Brandon Miller is going to go number 1. Out of the freshmen, Cam Whitmore will be the 2nd freshman. I think Jarace Walker will be number 3. Walker is one prospect that scouts and agents seem to agree on, is what I wrote. Versatile is the word that comes up often as his main attribute, and scouts are especially in love with his passing and rim protection. Plus, everyone raves about the motor and NBA-ready physique of Houston's freshman power forward. Here are a pair of scouts' takes on Walker. I'm very high on Jarace. He's a Swiss Army knife and does everything on the floor extremely well. He communicates on a high level. He's a natural leader, and he's competitive. Another scout said, he's massive, physically mature, smart, and process the game at a high level. He's a guy teammates will gravitate to on the floor and in the locker room, and he's also a really good passer that can orchestrate the offense and generate looks for guys. Teammates will love playing with him. And we didn't really see the passing and the processing speed fully, or we didn't really get to see a lot of that at Houston. Obviously, the scout was correct about Walker as a Swiss Army knife that does everything on the floor. So this scout was pretty much right. Even though Walker had a limited role on offense because the situation in Houston, he was going to a veteran team. But one of the things that I like about Walker, and I had this discussion recently at the Combine with the director of scouting for a team. He mentioned that Walker chose to go to a program that doesn't churn out one-and-done players, that has a coach that coaches hard, that holds guys accountable, and makes guys play defense. So even though he did not get to show like all the passing and the playmaking at Houston, he was coached hard. He went to a challenging situation where things weren't going to just be easy for him. And you know that he can defend. All right, here are scouts' takes on Anthony Black. NBA scout number 1. I think he's a lottery pick. There are some concerns because he's not an alpha and not always aggressive. But he's an unbelievable kid, extremely unselfish, and wants to win. Scouts' take number 2. He does a lot of different things on the floor. He passes and defends on a high level, but the shooting has a long ways to go. I think it's some mechanical stuff with the jumper, that he needs to figure out. But he does so many things well, and the measurables are all there. He's an underrated athlete, which we're starting to see now. Scout number 3 says, he's a normal age for his class, but he's just starting to come out of his shell as far as being aggressive. He was a late bloomer, so it makes sense. He's just starting to understand how good and how talented he is. Now, that is something that I've lately haven't been considering, that Anthony Black was a football player. And he started really focusing on basketball late. So I got to factor that in when I talk about his upside. All right, another scout talked about Jordan Walsh. This is a guy that Walsh is coming on late. I think that he has an opportunity to maybe sneak into the late first round, but I think he'll definitely be selected in the second round. And this is what a scout said about Jordan Walsh. The way he moves, I can't find a comparison. You don't see that often at 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan and ball skills. He's a freak competitor with a great motor. That has been proven to be correct. All right, NBA scouts take on Cason Wallace. He's a tough kid, not a real vocal guy, but a lead by example guy that impacts winning at a high level. He's probably the best point of attack defender in this class. I would say that is absolutely correct. He's a guy, and this is another quote from a scout. He's a guy NBA coaches are going to want to draft. Maybe not the front office because they're gunning for guys with upside, but coaches are going to want him on their team. I agree with that. All right, last one. I'm going to talk about Gigi Jackson again. This is what scouts have said about Gigi Jackson coming into the season. By all accounts, he's a good kid that doesn't have any character issues, but he's really young. He's probably just outside of the lottery for me if I were to do a big board right now. The ball skills are impressive, and his development has been wild. He was strictly a rim runner that just blocked shots, grabbed rebounds, and finished alley-oops. 3 months later, he was popping threes and creating separation and driving to the rim. Another scout. His age and recent development and how much he's improved is why I'm high on him. He's made a lot of strides recently and probably would be the top pick in 2024 if he didn't reclassify. So that is pretty consistent. All right, lastly, there are a couple guys that just weren't really talked about in the preseason who are going to be lottery picks, surefire lottery picks. One of them is Taylor Hendricks, guy that came out of nowhere. I don't think he was a top 40 or 50 recruit coming into the season. Grady Dick was highly touted. I don't think people, especially NBA scouts or even me, had him as a lottery pick coming into the season. But Grady Dick averaged 14 points, 5 rebounds, and he is going to be a lottery pick. I don't know if Grady gets past Orlando at number 11. Jet Howard is another name that is, I don't think he's going to be a lottery pick, but he's another name that has solidified himself as one of the top freshmen, same with Bryce Sensabaugh. Well, that wraps up this episode. I just wanted to do something a little different and go back at some of the old takes for myself and scouts on this 2023 freshman class. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe, and I am out.